Donald Trump's signature issue is becoming a liability for him. Again. But Democrats could still repeat their mistake and fumble the opportunity. Look, there is no way around it. Trump's immigration polling is getting terrible. Take this average of polling results from Nate Silver's Silver Bulletin. During the first few months in office in the spring of 2025, Trump's average approval rating on the issue of immigration was in the double digits. Fast forward a year, and it's now negative double digits. That's a 20-point swing on his best issue, the one that did more than any to return him to the White House. And under the hood, there are even bigger warning signs. NBC's February poll is a good example. It found 67% of Americans think ICE and Border Patrol have gone too far, 66% disapprove of ICE as an agency, 58% think law-abiding, regular citizens have something to fear from ICE, and 57% blame the Trump administration, not protesters or Democrats, for the unrest in cities like Minneapolis. This is what it looks like when support for your agenda is melting. And this really matters because immigration is completely intertwined with Trump's trajectory as a politician, his return to the presidency, and it's central to whether Democrats or Republicans win this era. Let's rewind here for a second. Remember, if there's one issue more than any other that has been Trump's signature, it's immigration. That began from the literal announcement of his candidacy in 2015.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
That quote infuriated liberals and immigrant rights advocates, and it had all sorts of smart people convinced his candidacy was over. But it delighted many conservatives, and it made immigration restrictions synonymous with Trump. That was enough to win him the Republican nomination and narrowly win the presidency. But it wasn't enough to win on the issue itself. Beginning when Trump came onto the scene in 2015, through when he left office in 2021, the country was consistently opposed to most of his immigration proposals. Take the border wall. For years, Americans broadly supported building a wall on the US-Mexico border, including late into Obama's presidency. But once Trump came along, that completely flipped. During his first term, around 60% of the country consistently opposed it. And this was true on all sorts of things. Since the 1960s, Gallup, one of the country's best pollsters, has been asking Americans if they want immigration decreased, increased, or to stay the same. For the first time ever, the share saying increase exceeded the share saying decreased during Trump's first term. Record high numbers of Americans said immigration was a good thing. Support for a path to citizenship for illegal or undocumented immigrants shot way up. And it wasn't hard to see why this happened. Trump was kind of the worst possible spokesperson for immigration restrictions. He launched his political career by claiming Barack Obama was born in Kenya. He told natural-born citizens like AOC to, quote, go back to where they came from. He campaigned on banning all Muslims from the US, a blatantly unconstitutional proposal that many of his own party opposed and the conservative Supreme Court struck down. He instituted a policy of family separation at the border. Remember, other presidents like Obama had overseen families being separated when the parent was accused of a crime or human trafficking or whatever. But in 2018, Trump's administration rolled out a plan to intentionally do it with all families. So overall, Trump made it really easy for people to form a narrative in their brain that his immigration policies were born out of racism, nativism, and cruelty. That created a big backlash, and Democrats sprinted to the left on the issue during his first term. One big example of this was during a 2019 Democratic primary debate. Almost every candidate on stage, including some of the ones identified as moderates, said they would support decriminalizing border crossings. A poll right after that showed that 66% of Americans opposed that idea, including half of all Democrats. Hey, by the way, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support us. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my newsletter at thelongrun.news. Link in bio. And this was the general trajectory of Americans' views on immigration in the 2010s. Before Trump came along, most voters were kind of in the middle on immigration, supporting a path to citizenship, but also some tough on illegal immigration policies. Then Trump arrived, and a lot of them were so repulsed by his views and rhetoric that the middle shifted left. People opposed things, like a border wall, that they previously supported, and many Democrats interpreted that as a mandate to move hard left. And when Trump left office in 2021, it looked to a lot of people like the country had delivered a verdict on immigration in general, like it had created a new consensus. And then everything changed. During Joe Biden's presidency, the situation at the border exploded. The country set the all-time record for the most monthly and annual border crossings, and then it broke both of those records again. In fact, the 4 years Biden was in office saw the single biggest influx in immigration, not just in raw numbers, but in percentage of the country, in American history. And again, however you feel about immigration, this was a disaster. Even the most pro-immigration people acknowledge this is not how the system was supposed to work. It was a mess. And really quickly, that changed the politics of immigration. Before the 2020 election, polls showed Americans trusted Biden more than Trump to handle it. But after Biden took office, immigration became a huge liability for him. By the time late 2023 and early 2024 came around, Americans were zooming right back to where they were before Trump. A majority of Americans wanted immigration decreased for the first time since right after 9/11. Multiple credible polls showed that a majority of Americans, including half of Latino voters, supported mass deportations. Immigration became Americans' top voting issue. Oh, and that border wall? The thing Americans really didn't like during Trump's first term? The thing Democrats went all in against, calling it racist and immoral? A majority of Americans wanted it for the first time since Obama was president. And so, with all of that in mind, is it any wonder Trump won? Yes, Kamala Harris did try to shift right on immigration, but she started doing that 3 months before the election. And the bipartisan immigration bill that she and Biden brought up all the time to prove that they were strong on immigration, it was released in February 2024, 9 months before the election, years after border crossings had exploded, and way too late to change anyone's minds. And it's worth noting that the ramifications of this were broader than just immigration. Imagine you're someone in the middle of the electorate. You swing to the left after being turned off by Trump's aggression on this issue. And then, right after he leaves office, the country has the biggest influx of illegal immigration in US history. From a purely psychological perspective, that's really impactful. And that, to me, is a big reason why you saw people's opinions of Trump himself hit all-time highs in 2024. Because they felt he was vindicated on his core issue, and therefore trusted him more, and Democrats less, across the board. And of course, that's a big part of why he got back to the White House now. Which leads us back to today. A year after all of that, that historic comeback, that humiliation of Democrats, that sense of vindication, a year after taking office with congressional majorities who would do whatever he wanted, with Democrats quickly moving right on immigration, and a public sympathetic to his goals, Trump has somehow managed to once again turn supermajorities of the country against him on his signature issue. So, what explains all of this whiplash? And what's it say about where Democrats are moving now? One of the most common arguments here is a political theory called thermostatic public opinion. A political scientist named Christopher Villegian came up with this idea in the 1990s. And it's the theory that public opinion essentially functions like, a thermostat. Essentially, when it gets too cold, the heat comes on. When it gets too hot, the AC comes on. In this case, the theory would be when Trump was perceived as too harsh and restrictionist in his first term, voters responded by supporting more lax policies. Then, when Biden was perceived as too lenient, voters responded by supporting harsher policies. Now Trump is back, he's once again perceived as too harsh and restrictionist, and voters are therefore responding by supporting more lax policies. To me, there's definitely some truth to this. And the fact that we see this on other issues too, like people cycling between wanting a bigger government when Republicans are in power and a smaller government when Democrats are in power, is a good argument that the center of the electorate is just really fickle and can't quite make up its mind. But I'm not sure that thermostatic opinion is everything here. It's not guaranteed that the country just vacillates between wildly different policies every 4 years. This is a political choice, a choice by the parties to ignore what the vast majority of the country keeps saying on immigration. And right now, the border is a good example of that. And it's a big warning sign for Democrats. Even now, as Americans are shouting their distaste for what Trump is doing on immigration enforcement, polls show that they mostly back what he's doing at the border. Over the past couple months, polls have shown over and over that when you separate the issues, there is a consistent, durable share of Americans who dislike his immigration policies overall, but still like Trump's border enforcement. And it's worth remembering, Trump's border policy is by far the strictest, most right-wing policy we have seen in decades. Declaring a national emergency, aggressively erecting more of the border wall, requiring asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while their cases are processed, sending some border crossers back without court dates, sending the military to the border. These are really aggressive moves, and half or a majority of Americans are telling pollsters they like it. even as they increasingly hate what the administration is doing inside the US. A CBS poll recently is another good example. It found that a supermajority dislikes how Trump is going about his deportation program, but half like his deportation goals. And remember, his goals are not a centrist policy. They're not even a standard conservative policy. They are, by his own description,
the largest domestic deportation operation in American history.
And even after all of this controversy, after masked agents running roughshod in American cities, after multiple US citizens being killed, half of Americans still like that goal. And that's a pretty crucial lesson, and one that both parties should really learn by now. During Trump's first term, when his family separation policy and wild comments were pushing the electorate left, that didn't mean Americans were asking to stop all border security altogether. During Biden's presidency, when he was letting in more people than ever before, that didn't mean Americans were asking to send masked federal agents to US cities or to deport legal residents who just wrote op-eds. Now, to some people, that might sound wishy-washy, both sides, whatever. But it's just not. It's just a basic statement of political reality. You are entitled to believe that all deportations are bad, but 80% of Americans, including most non-white voters, disagree with you. And you're entitled to believe that every single illegal or undocumented immigrant should be deported, but 80% of Americans, including most Republican voters, disagree with you. Voters keep saying over and over that they are in a more complex place than their politicians, and they keep being ignored. That helped ruin Trump's first presidency, Biden's presidency, and now it could be happening again. And the temptation is once again very real for Democrats to swing hard on this issue. But they have a very recent lesson about the perils of doing that. Kamala Harris lost in 2024 in large part because of the things she said and did during Trump's first term. If they want to avoid that in the future, they should think long and hard. Their success in 2026, 2028, and beyond might hinge on learning that lesson and breaking the cycle. If you like this video, remember to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell while you're there. And if you want to read more of my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter at thelongrun.news.